Moving on and shifting our focus to the big story that we are tracking on Mirror Now this hour. Amid the third wave of COVID, the crisis has disproportionately hit girls' education. A Parliament panel report has red flag closure of schools, which has affected education of 32 crore students, which includes nearly 16 crore girls. According to government data, the dropout ratio of girls during 2019 to 2020 was 15.1%. The panel has called for urgent measures to prevent girls from poor families being impacted by closure of schools and lack of digital access. In fact, the panel has also recommended incentivizing girls' education to minimize these dropouts. In fact, the panel has observed that in a post-pandemic scenario, the probability of adolescent girls dropping out of schools permanently due to economic crisis is very high. So these are some startling findings that have come to fore, and parliamentary panel has red flagged the impact on girls students education because of pandemic. In fact, it clearly says and red flags the closure of schools, which has affected the education of around 32 crore students across the country, but it includes nearly 16 crore girls. In fact, according to the government data, the dropout ratio of girls during 2019 and 2020 was 15.1%. And the panel has also called for urgent measures to prevent girls from poor families, especially being impacted by closure of schools and also lack of digital access. And the panel has recommended incentivizing girls' education to minimize the dropouts. In fact, the panel has also observed that in a post-pandemic scenario, the probability of girls dropping out of schools permanently due to economic crisis is very, very high. So some of the recommendations that have been made by the same parliamentary panel to incentivize girls' education is, of course, targeted scholarships, conditional cash transfers, provision of bicycles, and also access to smartphones and access to hostel facilities. So these are some recommendations that have been made by parliamentary panel, which has red flagged the impact of a pandemic on girls' education. In fact, let me go across to Bharti Ali, who is a child rights activist. In fact, Bharti, thank you so much for taking the time out and speaking to us. First of all, your reaction to this particular report that has come to fore, which clearly highlights that how the pandemic has badly impacted girls' education across the country.
It certainly has impacted, and there are reports which are clearly indicating increase in child marriage, reports indicating increase in child labor as well. We've seen personally, witnessed distress calls from girls talking about domestic violence in their homes, which has increased. We've seen, digital divide in the homes when it came to online education, very clear digital divide. And therefore, when it comes to access to mobile, which is, a scarcity in most families, it's not a luxury as we may want to think. The choices between giving it to the boy in the house and the girl in the house, and we've seen that discrimination happening. So there are definitely a lot of problems that our girls have witnessed during the pandemic, and I think it's time we did something about it. Then on the other hand, there are a lot of girls who've lost one or both parents to COVID, and they have their life has turned completely upside down. The PM Cares for Children program is there, but at the moment, no child has really received anything from that fund, because we're closely trying to follow that up as well. And we've seen that, that's again limited to children who've lost both parents, but there are others who've lost a single parent, and mostly fathers. Then there are young infants who were born, young girls who were newborn girls and lost their mothers to the COVID pandemic. They have been completely, shunned by their families. So there are a range of issues that we'll have to start looking at.
Right. Also, Bharti, we have also listed several reasons which could actually prove to be a roadblock to girls' education. And in fact, the top on that particular list is the lack of digital access to all the students. And this has been one issue that has been discussed a lot since the pandemic has hit the country, how this actually creates a big divide when it comes to education. And do you think that this particular issue has been taken seriously and has been addressed thoroughly?
No, it hasn't. In fact, we were hoping that when governments, state governments or even the central government initiate sponsorship programs, they'll at least take care of these aspects. So it's not just saying that, you'll get some admission in a government school. It's also about ensuring that they have access to devices as well as internet connection. You have to pay. You need a 599 rupees plan per month to have an internet connection that can help you do your assignments and logins to your classes. So those needs have really not been taken care of. At Huck Center for Child Rights, we are sponsoring some 25 students, and we've tried to look at these needs of giving them internet connection on a monthly basis and giving them a mobile device where needed. Then they need extra coaching because you see online classes have their limitations, so they need extra support. And we have to start working on all these three aspects if we really want our children, particularly girls, to remain within the education system and not drop out.
Right. Bharti Ali, thank you so much for speaking to us. In fact, I'm also now being joined by Sarita Sharma, who's an educationist. Sarita Sharma, thank you so much for speaking to us. First of all, just to remind our viewers what we are talking about and looking at right now, a parliamentary panel report which has red flagged the closure of schools and which has affected around 32 crore schools. In fact, before Sarita Sharma, let me go across to Priyanka Chaturvedi, Shiv Sena MP, who's also joining us on this very important issue. Priyanka Chaturvedi, thank you so much for speaking to us. First of all, your reaction on this parliamentary panel report. Why do you think, what are the big factors that actually have led to such a big impact on girls students specifically?
The parliamentary report is a vindication of something I have been taking up consistently inside the parliament through my zero-hour interventions with regards to women losing out due to COVID, especially young girls. Now, you are talking about digital India, and I would say access to digital spaces are often denied to women. Access to technology is denied to girls. If a family cannot afford a mobile phone or can afford a single smartphone, they would give priority to the male child to be able to continue his education. So these are massive challenges in India's growth story that we need to look at. Unfortunately, also, the other problem that will arise out of this with women dropping out of education is a lot of child marriages that we have seen, as growth of child marriages that we have seen in India during this phase. So this is just a vindication and an indicator of how we are losing out on, when we talk about Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, we're losing out on our girls getting educated because of these problems, because of these issues. And I think the government needs to be more sensitive to the fact that while we have spoken a lot about women, on ground, we haven't been able to do much for them and change their circumstances.
Right. Also, Priyanka, if we talk specifically about the digital divide that you also raised, this particular issue has been discussed a lot when it comes to the impact of pandemic on education. Do you think much has been done by the governments, both at center and states, to address this issue?
I'd like to say that pandemic hit the world at once. And at that point in time, there were many lacunas that we saw that existed as far as the digital divide is concerned. How you address that divide is something that should be a source of learning and understanding, and this report should take us in that direction on how do we bridge these gaps, how do we prioritize girls' education on these digital platforms, and also understand how women are being denied those spaces to be able to take forward their education. So we need to look at it more holistically without looking at blaming each other simply because the pandemic hit us unawares, and what we learn from it and how we address these concerns would be, I would say, the best way forward. And I would not want to accuse any governments or state governments, etc., but it has been almost 2 odd years and we still haven't been able to address these problems.
Right, Priyanka Chaturvedi, also this particular report also talks about incentivizing the girls' education to minimize the dropouts and to just lessen the divide that we are seeing right now. What, in your views, could be the measures that can be adopted on an immediate basis and also in long term to basically address this issue?
The measures that can be immediately applied would be to encourage and motivate through PSAs and through state governments putting out the message that educating girls is important, and prioritizing male over girls is actually being unfair to India's growth story as well. I would also say that schools should encourage enrollment of girls, especially the government schools, welfare schools that are funded by the state government as well as the center. They should incentivize girls coming through. I mean, we already have no fee structure for them, but motivating them to could be midday meals, etc., to come to schools, and most importantly, creating safe environments for the girl child to be able to step out of the house, to be able to, on these platforms, be able to use these platforms to educate themselves. I think that is a big motivation factor for even girls to know that they are working and studying in safe environments.
Right. My last question to you, Priyanka. You also represent a party which is in power in the state of Maharashtra. Any special steps that have been taken by the Maharashtra government to ensure that the girls' education do not take a hit when it comes to pandemic? Anything special that has been planned or is already in place?
In terms of the state government, we have ensured that smartphones are given to girl children so that there is no break in their education. We have also, through public participation, got many NGOs, many corporates through their CSR activities to and encourage them to work in that direction. And unfortunately, there could be lacunas even in the state government because of the lack of being able to, through the funds and refunds not coming from the center as far as the GST is concerned, to be able to address that. But as far as public participation is concerned, public-private participation is concerned, we are working on it and we understand those challenges. For example, even the vaccine challenge, we understood there is a huge gender gap. So we're working to creating all-women vaccination camps to make them more at ease when they come to take a vaccine, prioritizing them. So this is the same thing that we are even continuing with school in terms of enabling them and enabling them through smartphones to be able to join if they cannot physically go to school. And in schools, wherever now that schools have opened up, we are encouraging girls to come forward and continue their education even if they took a break in between.
Right, Priyanka Chaturvedi, thank you so much for speaking to us and to just basically putting this entire situation in perspective when it comes to Maharashtra. Also, let me go across to Sarita Sharma, educationist, joining us on this very important issue. Thank you, Sarita Sharma, for taking the time out. Just to remind our viewers that we are talking about a very important report that has come from a parliamentary panel, and they have highlighted that how around 16 crore girls across India, their education have been impacted because of pandemic. And Sarita Sharma, what do you think, in your view, are the biggest factors which have actually led to such a scenario?
I think the biggest factor, and I'm not going to repeat what other panelists have said, to my mind is basically socio-economic and cultural divide that we have in terms of gender education in India. Pre-pandemic also, you see data years after year about having a gender gap in education when it comes to enrollment, when it comes to achievement in various other educational factors. But during pandemic, this has sort of risen a lot. Multiple formal and informal studies are showing us again and again, and now this parliamentary committee report also is highlighting this issue. So to my mind, the main reason is in society not accepting girl child as an equal to a male child in the house and in the society, and through various schemes, even if we give some kind of an incentive to girl education, it doesn't reach in the way it should reach. I mean, there's no monitoring to how parents use some kind of a, bhatta that is given to parents for girl child education. In school, midday meals are there, certain incentives are there, but it doesn't reach the families because families feel that it is the responsibility, it's not their responsibility to prioritize girl child education. During pandemic, girls were subjected to, sibling care, household chores, not having the digital device in their hands. And families are also at loss because their economic situation is not such that they can probably provide handset to everybody. And so they generally prefer the male child in the house. So to my mind, a lot of it comes from the socioeconomic and specifically cultural practices that we have in India. And somewhere government's role is not to only incentivize, but also to bring those debates through their schools, through other community forums, through other NGOs in the society about probably educating the society around gender parity.
Right, Sarita Sharma, very pertinent points there. Thank you so much for speaking to us on this very big story that we are tracking closely on Mirror Now. A very startling fact that has come to fore because of this report where it has been clearly stated that girls' education is one of the biggest, worst hit things in the pandemic. In fact, 16 crore girls have been impacted so far across the country.